There's been no more bigger drama in sports the last week than that between Brad Marchand, the Boston Bruins, and the Boston Bruins fans. We had that Elliot Friedman report the other day talking about how they had a face-to-face meeting, Sweeney and Brad Marchand. Well, implied that it was Sweeney and Brad Marchand. And there were talks of numbers, and there was a sizable gap between what Marchand was asking for in a contract extension and where the Bruins were willing to go. And of course, right away, the fan base completely flipped on Bruins management because, I mean, let's be honest, Bruins management has messed up quite a few things over the last couple of years. Their asset management's been terrible. I think Don Sweeney should still be fired. But I was on here saying, hey, let's listen to the numbers here. You know, Marchand had one of those weird contracts. It was 6.3, technically AAV, but it was kind of front-loaded, so he was only getting paid about $3 million. But let's see. This is very vague from Elliot Friedman. We didn't know what the numbers were. We don't know what sizable gap is. That's a subjective term. And now we might have a little bit more insight on what the numbers actually were. So this was a report from Paul Bissonnette of Spittin Chiclets. Great podcast, great guys. You remember they had a report about Don Sweeney and Jeremy Swayman that the Bruins GM said was total bullshit earlier this year. I think these guys are pretty connected. Let's just say that. I think Paul Bissonnette, Biz Nasty, and the rest of the gang are pretty connected. And here's what they had to say about the numbers, the facts and figures in this Brad Marchand extension with the Bruins and what the numbers actually were that they were talking.
Offers exactly what he's making now for 3 years.
Yeah, I heard 663 times 3.
Exactly what he's making now. And Marchand's camp wanted 7.5. And Marchand had a meeting with Don Sweeney. And he went in and he said, I love it here. I've been a Bruin my entire career. I'm willing to meet you guys in the middle. And they would not come up on their offer. I thought that was insane.
That's insane. Crazy. And then, that's crazy. I mean, Sweeney talks about how it's a retool. It's not a rebuild. It's a retool. This draft pick, it's a 2028 conditional 2028 potential first round draft pick, best case scenario. So you draft a kid in 2028 at the end of the first round. That's 3 years away. You're not seeing a return on this investment 5-6 years. That's crazy. Why not sign the guy? I would have paid him $8-9 mil. I don't care. It helps build the future.
The last couple of lines there are exactly why you can't just trust Bruins fans just being blindly, enraged about something. I would have paid him $8 or $9 mil. He's a part of the Bruins' future. What part of the Bruins' future is Brad Marchand involved in, other than getting his number retired? Love Brad Marchand. Always have. Hate that he had to go just because I'm a big Bruins fan, and I'd love to see him in the uniform. But, what does he have to do with your future? He's going to turn 37 in May, and they're rebuilding, retooling, rebuilding. What is his role? And people will say, oh, he's the captain. He'll tell them the Bruins way and all that. And it's one of two things. First off, I think some of that's overblown. Second off, if there truly is this Bruins way of doing things, David Pastrnak has been on this team for 10 years. Charlie McAvoy's been on this team for 8 years. If they don't know the way, then there is no way. They played with Chara. They played with Bergeron. They played with Krejci. If you need Brad Marchand to be in the room to do that, then there is no such thing as the Bruins way of doing things. There's no way. And that would make a lot of sense as evidenced with how this team has fallen apart this year. But I hate that argument. He's part of your future because he's the captain. Well, if there is such a great Bruins culture, then how about these guys who've been on this team for a decade take that over? Nobody was saying, it stunk when Chara left, but nobody was like, oh, no, don't make Bergeron the captain. That's how this thing works. He's not part of your future, and you're not paying him $8 or $9 million. And as I said, we kind of have to take some sides here. I'm not paying him $7.5 million a year. I'm sorry. I'm not paying Brad Marchand $22.5 million through age 39 when I need to retool this team. I'm kind of with the Bruins on that one. At some point, this is a business. I love Marchand. I would love for him to play here. And I understand he wants to make more money than Elias Lindholm. Trust me, I get that. I'd rather him make more money than him too if it was all in a vacuum, all things being equal. But we are talking about a guy who's turning 37 in May and just had 3 surgeries last offseason. I can't justify giving a guy $22.5 million through age 39. I can't do it. And I can't sit here and be like, well, look at all he's done for the franchise. That's not how this works. This is not a Disney movie. Okay? It would be great if there wasn't a salary cap. There is. And you need to influx a ton of talent into this team. It doesn't just come with paying a 39-year-old $7.5 million. It doesn't make any sense, guys. He should be 40 by the end of that contract. I'm sorry. I don't like the moves the Bruins management has made. I don't like Don Sweeney being at the helm. I don't want him to be making the draft picks here and going through this retool. I would so much rather than go and get somebody else. But if the option is praise Don Sweeney for not making this deal or criticize Don Sweeney for not making this deal, I'm sorry, you got to praise the guy. $7.5 million a year, even with the raised salary cap. Not for me. He's a valuable guy to a contender right now. He's not valuable to a rebuild. I'm sorry. He's just not. Do I have to switch this over? Do I have to switch it to the Bruins side here behind me? Like, I'm sorry. I'm not on board with that. And honestly, I think it sucks that you had to do that to a guy that has been such a big part of your organization for so long, but I would draw a hard line around 6.3, 6.5. And the Bruins wanted to go 2 years, and Marchand wanted to go 3. They actually did say, okay, fine, we'll negotiate 3 years, but we're not doing that number. And so it kind of comes down to, if Brad Marchand really loved Boston and really wanted to stay here, he could have stayed here. Like, at the end of the day, I don't mind a guy going and chasing his bag, so to speak. I don't know if this is a huge bag for him, right? Like, I don't mind that. But then don't come and say, I never wanted to leave Boston. You were okay with leaving Boston when they didn't meet that number. And weirdly enough, like, I'm not a professional athlete, but I've been there in jobs, right? Where you love a job, you love the people you work with, but you're just not making enough money. And you got to move on. It stinks. But then you can't say like, I wish I never had to leave that. I never wanted to leave that. It's like, no, at some price, I was willing to leave that. We've all been through something like that in our lives. Brad Marchand, no different. Going to give him $7.5 million to basically age 40? I'm okay saying no to that. And if it means we have an awkward couple of months and him in a Panthers uniform and an awkward 2 years of him in somebody else's uniform at age 38 or 39, so be it. And yeah, this will sting if the Bruins continue to suck, if they don't get this rebuild done fairly quickly. But honestly, the way I look at this and the capital they now have and the cap space they could have with the extended cap, they could be a playoff team like next year. I'm not ready to put the house on it yet, but they could be next year. And at that point, you're not going to be thinking, damn it, man. I wish we gave $1.2 million more to Brad Marchand as he's scoring 45 points somewhere else. I am a Marchand guy. I think the Bruins have mismanaged assets. I think we're kind of past the day and age where they're disrespecting their stars. That seems to still be a thing. This is not bringing Ray Bourque to arbitration in the 90s, okay? This is not that. It was literally like the second best player in your history, and you brought him to arbitration. This is not that. Letting Zdeno Chara walk was not that. Letting Torrey Krug walk was not that. And letting Brad Marchand go, not sign and trade him at the trade deadline to a team that he clearly wanted to go to. Again, according to that Elliot Friedman report, that was the team he chose. Then I can't get as fired up about that as some Bruins fans are. I think that's the right move. I'm sorry. I do. And I know a lot of you are going to disagree with me, but I think that's the right move that the Bruins made to move on from a guy at age 38, 39. And I'm amazed at some of these analysts that still just buy into that. Like Mike Grinelli, he knows his stuff. He's a great Bruins fan. Like, I get that. But like, really, Biz, like, you've been around this game for a long time, man. And you don't understand how the Bruins could do that? Might I remind you, he's turning 37 in May. I hated the return they got for him, but clearly it seems like Marchand had handpicked the team, so I'm sure the Panthers kind of backed them into a corner. I hate the return they got for him, but I'm not mad at them for balking at that compromise. And because all we hear in the media the first few days is the Bruins were not willing to compromise. They hate Brad Marchand and are willing to spit in the face of all their fans and take a dump on the tradition of this organization. From what we just heard from the pro Brad Marchand Spittin Chiclets guys, that report, that sentiment is not at all true. The Bruins drew a hard line because this is a business. And they've done a poor job in business the last few years, and they need to turn it around. This was the balls on the table move they needed to make. They needed to draw a line in the sand, and they did it. If they can come to a different number and Marchand can come back in the summer, a cheaper number than $7.5 million a year for 3 years, maybe even if it's $7.5 million for 2 years, that is a big difference. Then maybe I'm saying, all right, fine. Be great to have him back and retiring as a Bruin. But based off that number right there, $7.5 million for 3 years to go through age 39, I don't need that for this Bruins retool. I don't need that. I don't think he's a part of your future. And look at Grinelli, kind of, his voice goes way down at the end there. He's like, oh, I don't want to get too much into that point because that's not correct. That's not a good point. He's not part of the Bruins' future. So, anyway, it would be better for Bruins fans if he retires a Bruin, but not at those numbers. I'm sorry. I can't have that. I can't believe I'm taking the Bruins side in this, but I'm going to be taking their side in this. I think you're crazy if you wanted to pay him $7.5 million a year over the last 3 years of his career. Do I want him to make more than Elias Lindholm? Yeah, I do. I think that's fair, but Elias Lindholm should be making $2 million. That's a game we can't play here. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Whether the Bruins should have kept Brad Marchand around, if that number was okay for you. Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. We're bringing you fresh Boston sports content every single weekday, live on YouTube, high noon Eastern time, and then wherever you get your podcasts and the segments to boot.